Where do we draw the line between a movie that has pornographic content and a movie that has sexual content? Because my wife and I go to movies at the cinema on a regular basis. And every once in a while they have movies that would be considered rated R in the United States, and they have strong sexual content in it. And yet these seem to be allowed to go. And I know that sometimes things seem less restrictive, because I'll be in the mall and I'll hear a song in the background at the mall that has uncensored language that wouldn't even be allowed in public necessarily in the United States, but it's here. And it's you have like F words and graphic language type things. And sometimes I wonder about where is that kind of line in terms of what's acceptable here and what's not acceptable here, and how do they determine where that line is?
Can anybody tell me what's going on? Tell me what's going on.
We have laws. Sometimes the laws are just for whoever is seeing the constitution. We have a constitutional government, or we have a constitution governance or law enforcement. But some of these laws are not actually actively enforced. But it's also it's also interesting for you to say that you've listened to music with profane content.
Well, I was in the mall and I'm hearing in the background, the music in the background has the uncensored.
Yeah, but then
songs.
Ironically, that music is still American.
It's American music, but they're playing it.
Yeah, because I've watched
publicly, which they couldn't even do that in an American mall.
Interesting, because I've not been to America still anyway, but I've seen shows where there's a Lil Wayne is singing his music uncensored.
Well, okay, but there's two types of television in the United States. There's over-the-air TV, and then there's cable or satellite TV. Cable or satellite TV does not have those restrictions, but over-the-air TV is very strongly regulated. So, for example, you can't use, like the F word, for example, over-the-air on American television. And on radio, if they're playing songs, I'm about to have the best effing night of my life, that song, whatever, they have to cut that word. They can't have that word in there on the radio. And they can get in trouble if they play that song unedited. Because there's restrictions like that. But it varies from...
And those double standards, really.
They are double standards, but the idea, the rationale behind it is that anybody can access free television stations and free radio stations. But you have to actually pay to get satellite or cable TV. So you have to walk into that. You actually have to choose to have that. And that's the argument to why they're stricter. I'm not saying, there's still not inconsistency here. But these are maybe some of the things I've noticed about America versus Uganda, is that America has this hypocritical double standard. You can go to a movie, you can hear as much bad language as you want, but you can't turn on the radio and hear that same bad language. And if a station plays that song, they can get in trouble with the FCC.
Yeah, maybe the issue with the radio station is that children can listen to radio stations.
Because it's a free anybody can turn it on.
Yeah, but not everyone will go to the cinema.
And the movies are restricted. Like, for example, an R-rated movie. Movies that I can get into here in Uganda, for example. Like, I go to the cinema, there's no restrictions. And I see kids, or adults bringing in children to movies that would be considered R-rated. Of course, in the U.S., you can bring a kid to an R rating. It's just okay, I take it back. R-rated means children can't go without an adult. So maybe, but I don't know if there's any rules that say that if a 16-year-old, for example, goes to the cinema and says, I want to go see Monkey Man, which is an R-rated movie, or Beekeeper, which is an R-rated movie in the U.S., will the theater let them in without an adult? In the U.S., they won't. But here, my impression is they would.
Yeah, though here cinema is really for the high-end people. It's not. I don't think that's something the government will really worry about, because less than 0.1% of the country
people go to movies.
Movies, like 0.1, even less than 0.1, way less than 0.1 of the country. So it's not a public problem.
So they're not too concerned about it. Because it's not a major impact on society.
It's usually the richer people in the neighborhood.
And so maybe that's the difference with porn, though, because porn is a blight on society. It destroys societies. It destroys families.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And porn is all over the place, but that's why the government is trying to approach that, more aggressively by restricting internet access to it and all that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have topic of freedom maybe you wanted to discuss, and then you can ask me about it?
Yeah, no, we can talk about freedom in the line of freedom in the line of permissiveness. Okay, I think we talked about it before, but I want to bring it back. Like how freedom affects morality. Like, could freedom be the reason why we're having a very immoral,
Okay.
Freedom is a multifaceted, topic. So we can look at it in different ways any single day. So earlier we talked about morality, we talked about permissiveness along the way. Could there be a connection between the freedoms that we're having in our contemporary times that is impeding on morality, or that is having a very great impact towards the degeneration of morals in our society? Is there a way that the work people are trying to use freedoms to actually promote permissiveness?
To promote permissiveness, yeah. And I think, isn't that kind of what we talked about, that a lot of the woke culture is about? For example, the term fat phobic comes from, if you're, for example, saying being fat is unhealthy and you want to encourage people to be skinny because just for health purposes, it can be unhealthy and dangerous to be fat. But yet, if you point that out, you can be called fat phobic, or you're fat shaming.
Body shaming.
Yeah, body shaming, that's another word. But we can also talk about slut shaming, the term slut shaming.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Right. Is if, for example, someone's out there say a girl's out there being permissive on social media with the way she dresses, or with the way she acts, or with the way she presents herself on social media, and you criticize her for that, not because you want to condemn her, but because you want to help her to, not do this, don't do this to yourself.
As well as discourage whoever is following.
Yes. There's disgusting people out there that are watching you and following you, and they're not your friends.
And even the younger people that are looking up to you. When you let's say a bigger person, usually you find celebrities that are the ones who dress like that and post these very, very salacious dress, pictures. So the children are watching these people on social media, following them, and they're copying from them. So it helps that I think there's a famous statement that the problem with the world, I may not get it right, but I say the problem with the world is that the good people are quiet. I've forgotten.
I know the quote. The quote is, the only thing that is necessary for evil to triumph in the world is for good people to say nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the quote, yeah.
Exactly. So you don't want to be the good people that say nothing, So when you go onto these sites and you actually say something, then they say all those shamings, your slut shaming, your body shaming, your etc shaming, and then they come at you,
Yeah.
But they're trying to protect other people, because usually the older people who are doing these things actually go on cases. So you're not really trying to shape them, because they will defend themselves, because they've been so empowered in their permissiveness that you can't do nothing to them. But then you still have to criticize them so that the younger generation doesn't copy from them.
Right.
And then they will still attack you anyway.
Because I'm an American, I would believe in freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But I also understand how our extreme definition of freedom has been very destructive upon our culture, and how it's very much eroded away our values and eroded away our sense of what is right and of what is decent, and how this has destroyed people's lives, this has destroyed families. It's not positive influence on society. So freedom, and the thing is, the interesting thing about freedom is that freedom hasn't always been defined that way in the United States. So where did freedom come to the point where it suddenly now means I can do whatever I want, no matter how harmful it is, no matter how destructive it is?
Yeah, I see. Well, I wouldn't know where it came from, but all I know it's pernicious, And recently I was having a discussion. We're talking about relationships. What's the problem with relationships? Why is it that many relationships are very short term? I won't talk about the points I gave earlier about single motherhood. But the other part is the part is that how relationships are marketed and how the relationships start, it starts on a wrong note, because we are promoting a permissive culture. Ladies are technically moving around naked. So when I see you and I admire you and I like you and I have a crush on you, most of the time I'm lusting on you because I've seen you half naked. So even when I approach you with all these sweet words, we call them the sweet nothings, I'm just trying to have sex with you, you know. So many a time the reason for relationships is sex. But then if I'm not wrong, you might correct me. In the earlier days, people used to date or engage the opposite gender for marriage or for procreation or to make a family. But nowadays, people don't engage the opposite gender for those things. Exactly.
Yeah.
Those things are just mistakes. By mistake, you end up having a baby.
Yeah.
Those people engage because of sex. But how did you get to the place where relationships are just about sex?
Well, I think another question I would ask is, how do we get to the point where that's acceptable to see it? That's acceptable to see it that way in society. Because maybe some would say that these things were happening even back then, but maybe it just wasn't out in the open. But now the problem is it's come to the point where everything is out in the open. And I'm kind of seeing how this erosion has taken place in the United States. So for example, in my mom's generation, whenever there was like a girl that would get pregnant, you know, the girl's reputation would be ruined. Okay. Of course, the guy's reputation wouldn't be ruined, so there's an inconsistency there.
Just a patriarchy.
Yeah. So, right. So I'm not condoning that.
Yeah.
It takes two, and you're both equally, responsible here. So it's like my parents' generation kind of knew what was right and wrong, but they did it anyways. But they cared, maybe, I don't know if they cared, that's the right word, but they knew that it was right and wrong and there were consequences to doing right and wrong. And then my generation kind of took it a step farther and said, we know what's right and wrong, we know it's wrong, but we're going to do it anyways, we don't care, we're just going to do it because we want to do it. Then the current generation takes it a step further and says, it's not even wrong.
There's no wrong.
Right. So it's progressed.
Everything is right.
So because, right, everything is right. So
can you do that again?
Can I do that
Can
again?
you explain that again?
Yeah. So
the three generations.
So the three kind of generations. The three generations. The first generation, my parents' generation, knew
it's
what
not
was,
necessarily the first, but it's the first.
right, not the first, but kind of in my experience because
Yeah.
I'm restricted by my age. I don't know what happened in my grandparents' generation.
You probably know, but haven't experienced it.
Yeah. So, but within my parents' generation, they knew what was wrong. They did it anyways, but they lived in a world where they were encouraged not to do these sort of things, and there were consequences to doing those things. Even if those consequences weren't fair, like the girl would face more consequences than the guy would, and maybe they should have both faced consequences. But they knew it was wrong, and they kind of did it secretly, but then they would get caught and there would be consequences. So the next generation, say my generation comes along, we did the same things that my parents did in secret. So my parents' generation did it in secret. When they got caught, they got in trouble. We did it openly, but we still knew it was wrong, but we said, we're going to do it anyways because we want to do it. We know it's wrong, but we're going to do it anyways. The current generation...
Was there a consequence in your generation?
I would say for the most part, no. Like, for example, in my parents' generation, a girl's reputation could be ruined if she got pregnant. But in my generation, no. If a girl got pregnant, her reputation wasn't ruined, so there wasn't really consequence. I mean, there's the regular consequences, like if you get pregnant, you have to give birth.
Finances and school.
Yeah, there's all those. But there's no cultural consequences. There were no cultural consequences necessarily. I mean, when I was in high school, there were girls who got pregnant. They weren't treated differently than the girls who did get pregnant. But maybe there are people out there watching this who disagree with me and say, no, there were.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah, but I'm speaking from my experiences. I don't have all the answers, and maybe there are people that are going to come back and say, no, you're wrong. And please do. If I'm wrong about this, please tell me.
Yeah.
But my generation still knew what was wrong. You know, like, for example, you were to ask me, do you know that what you're doing is wrong? Yeah, I know it's wrong, but I want to do it, so I'm going to do it anyways. But the current generation then does all the exact same things that my generation did, but they don't think it's wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, if I want to do this or that, as long as it makes me happy, you know, if I want to go out and have sex whenever I want, if I want to go out and do this drug, whatever I want, smoke pot, whatever I want, that's not wrong.
Yeah, you know, there's a time when smoking cigarettes, people used to hide in Uganda. Now they don't hide. Just cigarettes, normal cigarettes, tobacco. Now they don't hide anymore. But there was a time when people used to hide, and in the strip clubs in Uganda, those illegal ones, people were even having sex in the club on the strip, on stage, people having sex, and it's people don't care.
Well,
And you find even the music, people just sing. The Ugandan music right now, people are singing. They're basically singing about sex, like directly, like, and it's that's what sells.
Probably because of the American influence. Because that's what
Definitely, and that's what is selling right now. If you sing any sense, no one listens to you. Same with our podcast. If you're talking nonsense, then maybe you get more viewers. Listen on TikTok, but then if you're taking some of these things, no one wants to know. We've reached a place where morals have been so eroded, and me, I still get back to too much freedom. The freedom has reached a place where it has worn out conscience. There's nothing as pernicious to the world as a world without a conscience. People without a conscience. Because let's say, for example, your mother's generation, they had a conscience.
They knew what was right and wrong. They might have still did it. They did wrong things, but they knew what was right and
wrong.
wrong.
They were even hiding. And that means it was done way less than it would have been done anyway. So because they had a conscience. Same with the generation, there was a conscience regardless, but then it was slowly eroding.
Right, we overthrew our conscience and did the things anyways, even though we knew it was wrong.
But now this generation, there's zero conscience. Like last week I was watching rugby at some place, and this girl literally comes dressed. She was like, a polythene, the blouse is literally a polythene bag. Like you could see her breasts clearly. Yeah. In your mother's generation, her conscience wouldn't let her dress like that. She would feel naked, right?
Right.
But in our generation, girls are dressed like that. They don't feel anything. They actually feel so excited when people look at them. They don't even get offended when people they just like it. They like the attention that comes with it. This is clear to show that the conscience has been eroded by too much freedom. You can do whatever you want, and that freedom is eroding conscience. Like people can just go do whatever they want, and no one is going to touch them.
Well, just look at the evolution of bathing suits in the United States, to where at one time it was men would try to get a sneak peek at a woman's ankles, like say maybe 100, 150 years ago, because the bathing suits went all the way, down to the ankles, and men wanted, look at the ankles, and then slowly it got less and less until you eventually got to bikinis, and then you've even got less than bikinis now,
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. It's too much.
Yeah,
it's too explicit. But I know people get it.
Yeah.
So you reach a point where we are not sensitive at all. Like our conscience has been so eroded. And for me, I look at the idea of too much freedom without any boundaries, freedom without freedom in things that we don't have to have the freedom.
Yeah.
And can only get worse unless like you said, a quote you said, unless the good people talk about it. We're not the good people, but at least we're trying to be those good people.
Right. All right. So, freedom. It's an interesting discussion, Paul. So, we'll have to see what type of response we get to this.
Yes, like I said at some point in the video, I said freedom is a very multifaceted topic that we may not really touch on everything. There's economic freedom, there's financial freedom, there's positive freedom, there's negative freedom, there's political freedom, there's a lot of freedom, religion and etc. But then we've more like talked about the social freedom or the moral component of it, because that's kind of in line with what we've been talking about all along. That's the direction we chose to take. So don't assume that we are not aware of the other freedoms. It's just that we chose that direction. Right. But in case you want us to, approach the other direction, you can always suggest. Yeah, so let us know in the comments. Yeah. And we'll be back in 7 days, Paul. So definitely. Yeah. So bye for now. Bye.